All right, this week's Tuesday tip. So what I want to talk to you about is the importance of using a title company and a lender that are local to the area. So I don't like breaking the rules or getting in trouble with this because I'm not supposed to steer people, right? But the reality is if you use a title company that's not from this area, they don't know the fees. They don't know what it takes to record a deed in this area. They just don't understand how real estate is done here. So recently we had a transaction where a client really wanted to work with a title company out of California. And look, none of us knew that the title company out of California only does title and they have a separate escrow company because they operate differently in a different state. And unfortunately, nobody told us. So we get to a couple days before settlement and they're like, who's the escrow company? And we're like, we have no idea. We called you, you're the title company. Like, oh, but you're supposed to call it an escrow company as well. And everything kind of got shifted and pushed around. Look, we made it all work and we got through it, but we could have avoided that if we would have just stuck with someone local who knows the area, knows the rules, knows the fees. Just makes everything a lot simpler. So on the lending side, it's a little different with the local lender. So what happens is when you make an offer on a property, like me as a listing agent, for example, I'm advising my clients based on everything that's in this transaction, right? And here's what I know. That particular transaction I was just mentioning, right? We ended up working with mortgage as well. And we didn't even know that was going to be the case because the buyer used a broker. The broker ended up being the one doing our loan. Well, had I known it, I don't know that we would have done that deal or we would have gone that route because we know as agents that, look, if you're working with a big bank or any of these folks, they just don't do as good of a job as someone who is literally touching the file that we have a direct line of communication with. And long story short, in that scenario, it had an issue with something very at the end of the road that any good mortgage lender would have saw in the very beginning of the transaction, and there's steps that could have been taken in order to resolve it. So the reality is, when I'm a listing agent and I look at the seller and I've got 5 offers in front of me and I'm going over them, I'm like, this one's fat. This one's a local lender. This is a guy out of state I don't really know. And then this one over here is another local lender, and I have seen this person settle many transactions. So what just happened in that conversation is that a lot of the seller's weight shifted to this deal over here and said, okay, well, tell me about this one. Now then it becomes dollars. Dollars are a factor too, but the question is that if the deal and this deal over here, I mean, how much is the seller willing to shift? If this one's $2,000 less, the seller may say, you know what, let's take the sure thing that's over here. So ultimately, that's what happens behind the scenes in negotiation with the sellers in the background. And that's why it's important that you work with someone reputable, that agents in the market are going to recognize who they are and then get you to the table.